All right, and we're going to start with the pledge, so if everyone could stand up. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Betty, could you let the record show that the board met in executive session to consider discussions regarding collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law? We're going to start with our student recognition. So, shall we begin?
Yes.
Okay. Can we have Dahlia come and stand with us?
Yes.
That's it? I'll hand these to you.
Great. Hello. How are you? Hello. So we have some middle schoolers here tonight to be honored for their musical talents. Each year, the Nassau Educators Association hosts the All-County Music Festival, and the names of the finest musicians from all the schools in Nassau County are nominated by their music teachers and sent to a committee of Nassau County music educators, hello Mr. Dennis, who selects students for various groups. North Shore had a strong presence at the Division II and III All-County with 22 vocalists, 11 band students, and 3 string students. These committed middle school musicians attended after-school and weekend rehearsals. The festivals culminated in dynamic performances at the Tillis Center, so welcome. And I'm being a little rude tonight for those of you who don't know who I am, and most of you probably do. I'm Peter Girizzo, I'm the superintendent here, and I'm thrilled to see so many people here tonight, so welcome. So when I call your name, please come up. We have, thank you, we're starting with All-County Band, and we'll start with Nathaniel Brower. We have a certificate for you, and North Shore Pen. Thank you. Charles Cerrito. Hello. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Charles.
Make sure you turn around for Mom.
Congratulations. Your mom wants a picture. Turn around.
Welcome.
There you go. Congratulations.
Okay, and parents, if you want pictures, just stop us. We'll slow it down so you can get your picture. Ruben Schoenig.
Strings.
Okay. So now we're going to introduce our string students, Noah Lee.
Congratulations, Noah.
Eileen Chow.
Congratulations, okay, now we're doing chorus.
Okay. And now we welcome our singers, our choral students. Jason Bazile, or Basil.
As well as you had it right.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Jason.
Genesis Geismar. That's for you.
That's for you.
Thank
Congratulations.
Maiko Giannakis. No?
Okay. I'll take that.
Thank you. Christopher Gosling.
Congratulations, Christopher.
Make sure you turn around. Bella Martaki.
Congratulations, Bella.
Turn around.
Congratulations, Bella.
Loretta Nestor.
There she is.
Great.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Faith Oaks.
Congratulations.
Ella O'Hara.
Congratulations, Ella.
Juliet Ronaldo.
Congratulations.
Catherine Salerno. Welcome.
Congratulations, Catherine.
Isabel Segal. Welcome.
Take your certificate.
You can turn around. You're welcome. Emery Viskovich. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Welcome.
Congratulations, Emery.
Carolina Voles. Okay. Ava Winter.
Congratulations, Ava.
Last but not least.
And Yosef Winter. Joseph, right?
Congratulations, Jason. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
When you have a name like Jerizo, you have to. Takes a little. I think that's it. So thank you all very, very much.
Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, no, I think that's it. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Yeah. Mako. Yep.
Mako, where are you?
Here she is. Okay. We're going to,
President Labate?
yes.
I'd like to make a motion to move the report of the Student Government Association and then public comment up to the next point in our agenda in recognition of the
Okay.
crowd we have here.
Could I have a second? Second. All in favor? Okay, so moved. We'll start with our SGO.
So it's definitely been a while, so we have lots to catch up on. Starting with the exchange trips, both the Italian and Spanish trips were a total success, left with great experience for everyone. Also the Portugal trip as well, the band, orchestra, and chorus.
And the exchange trips aren't over yet, so the Italian kids are coming in just about 26 days, so everyone's getting excited for them and kind of planning. So far on our agenda is definitely Benihana's and a couple nights out in the city maybe to see a show or something. So everyone's excited for that second half of the trip.
There you go, yeah.
Also, as many of you probably know, Sports Night was a great hit. Part of Sports Night week, not only did we spread the school spirit, but we also, as SGO, held two fundraisers, which was the plastic fundraiser and the can drive fundraiser, which we've now done for 2 years. And the seniors won. which was very good. And the sophomores then came in second, and then the juniors, and then the freshmen. So overall, it was a really good time.
Right after sports night the following Friday, there was the Smuggler's Notch overnight ski trip, which was always is a great time with all the best teachers. So that was really awesome.
And then this week and last week, the spring sports have started. So I don't think really anyone can believe it's spring, especially when there's all the snow on the ground. But all the spring sports are starting, so everyone's excited over that.
And also, the musical is next weekend, so they are starting to sell tickets at artangels.org. So make sure you get to see that. They have a show on Friday, and then Saturday in the morning, and also at night as well.
Yeah, and just one more thing about that. I know that everyone has worked like really hard to put this musical together, especially because I know there had to be like a really large crew, especially stage and the performers. So
And
definitely try to get there.
And also, a lot of new faces will be on the stage this year, which is very exciting.
And then since it's kind of the second half of the year, a lot of senior stuff is starting to happen. So we've started to organize for the senior fashion show, which will be April 28th. So you can get your tickets for that. And everyone's starting to organize getting their tuxes and their outfits for the senior fashion show.
And today was very exciting for the seniors because we also had our senior photo, and we had like a bunch of pets come, dogs, turtles. So it was very exciting. Continue.
And finally, the sophomores, just part of SGO, the sophomores took on the February fundraiser, which was a Valentine's Day fundraiser, where where you could send hearts to different kids in the grade, and the money went to the Cohen Children's Hospital. And then for the month of March, the seniors are taking on the SGO fundraiser, which is going to be a spring fundraiser. So that's all we have.
That's it.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to open up to public comment, and so what we ask you to, I should probably put this on. What we ask you to do with public comment is when you come up to the podium, if you would give us your name and your town of residence so that our clerk can keep track of who's speaking. If you have a statement that you're reading, we'd ask that you could give that statement to Ms. Chiappi after you read it, so that she can put it in the minutes. And I'll open it up.
My name is Kate Sweeney, and I'm from Seacliff. I would like to, first of all, thank the North Shore Central School District Board of Education, my fellow students, community members, and teachers for being here tonight. We are here today as the group Weave Together to discuss a culture of intolerance and the subsequent lack of action by the administration in the face of that. The mission of Weave Together is to channel the collective voice and power of young adults to insist on social and institutional change. Weave Together is a student-formed, run, and organized group committed to creating a community more accepting of all races, cultures, genders, ethnicities, religions, sexualities, and disabilities, something included in the North Shore High School credo and mission statement, which hangs up in the cafeteria, though is not executed in practice. The Dignity for All Students Act, a New York State law recognized by the North Shore Central School District, which legally requires New York State public schools to create a, quote, safe and supportive environment free from discrimination, intimidation, taunting, harassment, and bullying on school property, on the school bus, and/or at school functions, end quote. We will now hand out packets letters we have collected from students, alumni, and community members on the subject. For any members of the community who would like a copy of the packet, there are some extras up front, and they're also on our website, standupns.org. I would like to now hand it over to Maya Reeves, and thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Maya. I am from Seacliff. I saw a girl at the elementary school the other day who reminded me a lot of myself as a little girl. She had tan skin and bright green eyes and curls pointing in every direction. I watched her play with her friends in the courtyard, and she was the only girl of color among them. And I thought about the events that have transpired in my time at North Shore. Maybe this girl would grow up burning those curls straight just to stop the bullying. Maybe someone would tell her that she's lucky she's black. Lucky that she's mixed because black girls aren't pretty. Or that she shouldn't be upset when people call her a nigger because it's just a word. I thought about how that child might spend her entire life in this place and still never feel a part of it. I'm not here today to complain about bullies. Kids will always be mean, and there's nothing that's going to change that. And it's too late to right those wrongs. But the ways the administration of North Shore have dismissed and belittled serious issues is the reason that we are all here today. During my time at North Shore, I have witnessed as well as experienced sexual harassment, racism, bullying, and mental health issues, all of which the North Shore administration has had an inadequate or no response to. After months of harassment in freshman year, I got the courage to tell an administrator. I told them how this boy harassed me on the daily, and on the particular day I went to the office, threatened to follow me home from school, hang me, and then rape my dead body from a tree. Imagine your child looking into the eyes of someone she believes is there to protect her, asking her to put a stop to the boy who held her against the wall in science class, pinned her down in the math center so he could etch his name into her arm with a staple, and call her a stupid bitch who should like the attention when she just asked to move her seat away from him. Imagine that person looking into the eyes of your child and telling her there's just nothing they can do. This boy got called into the office and didn't even get a slap on the wrist. He just got angry at me for trying to stop him. And every day after that, until summer, was a living hell. That same student sexually assaulted 2 of my friends the next year, something I believe could have been prevented by taking his threats towards me and several other students like myself more seriously. He is luckily no longer a student here, but the administration that dismissed me then has continued to display a pattern of negligence for the entirety of my time here. March of 2017, a former student and a very close friend of mine committed suicide. His body was found on the Glen Head tracks on a Thursday morning. I should not have held girls in the bathroom crying while our school said nothing. They hadn't even informed staff or offered counseling or social work services to the students. Sure, we have confidential social workers at the school, but half of the people here don't even know their names or where their offices are located. I shouldn't have to ask why the school didn't hold a moment of silence for a boy who once proudly called himself a Viking, who played for our soccer team, who even bought the stuffed eagle that still sits in my humanitarians class today. Regardless of how close people were to him, his death had a ripple effect in our community. I believe it's a serious oversight on the part of my school to not address the mental well-being of their students. 3 other students besides him have passed in my time here, all of which the school hasn't addressed. These are all serious issues, and they are all here, and they are all real, and none of these kids would be here today if they weren't. North Shore's motto is to discover your dreams, and I'm here today to make sure that those dreams are for all of us. Thank you.
I'm John Royal. I'm from Glen Head. I've been told that at North Shore, everyone matters, everyone cares, and everyone learns. I've been told that IB students are meant to be principled, open-minded, and caring. Our school district's mission statement says, "We aspire to foster in our students those qualities of character consonant with the ideals of a democratic society." But I've also been told that I'm a faggot. When I was in middle school, I heard words like gay and faggot being used as insults. The fear and intolerance of homosexuality made me unable to come to terms with myself, who I really was. So I lied, not only to myself, but also to others. I've witnessed firsthand how this intolerance is embedded in North Shore's culture, and many of my peers never outgrew it. I'm a junior now. Years have passed since then, and yet I still hear gay being used as an insult. Although my own skin color may indicate otherwise, my sister and I are Maori, meaning indigenous to New Zealand. When I told people this in elementary school, the general reaction was, "You're Maori? Isn't that a name for girls?" Even worse, my oldest sister Francesca was taunted for her skin color. Because they said things like, "What are you, a Native American or something?" And because our school never taught us the value of diversity, Francesca grew up ashamed of being non-white. All these stories show North Shore students committing acts of intolerance, and when the administration hears of them, the response should be appropriate disciplinary action, not excuses. But we also need to address a bigger problem, because one cannot commit acts of bigotry without first having bigoted thoughts to act on. I have a question for everyone here. Why are we raising bigoted children? There are a number of factors. There are a number of factors, not the least of which being that our district is disproportionately white, disproportionately upper middle class, and of course you're going to fear diversity if you've never felt what it's like. This is a systemic issue, and every story of intolerance that we've heard is just one more example of how the system has failed not only the victims, but also the perpetrators. When incidents like these occur, it's not enough to just call home, assign a detention, and move on as if nothing has happened. The students committing these acts are at fault, but so is the system that failed to prevent them. Despite all this, I'm optimistic about the future. We can fix our broken system. It doesn't have to be this way.
My name is Suhana Singh. I'm from the Glen Head, Old Brookville area. Hello, and good afternoon to the administration, my fellow peers, and members of the Board of Education. In my account, I am emphasizing the religious and cultural ignorance and discrimination. My name is Suhana Singh. I am a sophomore and a Sikh, or a Sikh, which you may know of. Myself and some family members included have been targeted for our religion. Sikhism is currently the 5th largest religion in the world. Despite it being so large, no one really knows what Sikhs believe or value, and what they look like. Yes, I have been targeted. Yes, I did try to blend in with every other girl in elementary school. Yes, my name has been switched or mistaken since kindergarten with the other brown-skinned girl in my class. No, she doesn't look anything like me besides the color of our skin. Yes, my teacher in elementary school assumed my name was not Suhana, but instead the Hindu boy's name in my class. Yes, I have been called Suhana by a teacher for an entire school year with my continuous correction, but her lack of effort to correct. Yes, my long hair has been stared at, laughed at, and slyly commented about. Yes, I have been referred to as anorexic Indian girl online. Fortunately, my accounts of being targeted are not very extreme, but unfortunately, they are more extreme for others, like my brother. Let me tell you about his instance. Due to the unfortunate modern social climate, Muslims are largely correlated with being terrorists. Also, due to the ignorance and assumptions of people, Sikhs are often correlated with being terrorists, and almost always a male Sikh or a Sardar, because Sikhs are mistaken to be Muslims who are stereotyped as terrorists. But Sikhs are a completely separate religion and entity than Muslims. My brother, a junior named Nanak Singh, as early as 3rd grade, was targeted. In 3rd grade, he was threatened by his peers that they would cut his hair and even brought scissors near his head. Sikhs do not cut their hair as respect of the common belief that God gifted it to us and we should treasure it rather than dispose of it. At this, the teacher did nothing but yell at the threatener. Later, in 5th grade, he was victimized as a person who lit a match in the back closet of the room. There was absolutely no evidence or no speculation done to say that it was him, but only the word and the continuous suggestion by students and parents that he had to be the one who did it. And what was this victimization based off on? His looks? The fact that he wears a turban? We would still like to know. In middle school and in high school, he has had his name made fun of, has been called a towel head because he wears a turban or a dastar on his head. He has also been called a terrorist and referred as a member of ISIS. Due to the previous experience with my oldest due to previous experience with my oldest brother who graduated in 2013 and the lack of an effective response from administration, he dealt with the instances in his own measures, but the repercussions for him would always be equal or more severe compared to the perpetrator. The issue that my brother and I, as well as other Sikhs face, cannot account for every allegation, but I promise you, things like these do happen to students. However, based on the accounts we've tied together, these experiences are similar to the experiences several minorities and students of different groups have faced. It is real, and we need to face it. We need to make diversification of students and staff a priority. We need to educate ourselves and value each other. I commend the administration on how they dealt with some of these several issues, because if they were not presented with sufficient evidence, they did not make the accused person face severe consequences. Sometimes, however, they gave up instead of finding out if the accused perpetrator committed the action. To this, I say, please do everything in your power, even if you say you do. I will be in the school for the next 2 years, which is a lot of time to make amends. I look forward to creating a better and more comfortable environment for the students to come. Remember, weave together and achieve together. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Danielle. I'm from Seacliff. I have heard racism is everywhere and will be forever. Learn how to cope and stop complaining. You're graduating in 4 months. This movement is pointless and won't change anything. Nigger. I know this is shocking and you may consider this offensive in the public forum, but think about the effect that it had on me. I have learned these are the attitudes and mentalities that persist within the North Shore Central School District culture. These attitudes are not consistent with an educational culture and safe learning environment. Cultural, political, and social change started with past generations, and it is my demographic and my generation's obligation to take up the mantle of change. I have experienced moving to the North Shore District at the age of 3. I've dealt with an uncountable number of microaggressions and cultural incidents that have left me silent, but I've reached a stage and I believe we have reached a time where vocal, audible clarity is necessary. We cannot continue to be silent. We will not be silent. My generation has become increasingly active in asserting respect and exposure in public discourse, in politics, and in school. We expect institutional change. I have learned we fear most what we cannot see or understand. I was told there were not enough witnesses. We were told there were not enough witnesses. I would like for all the Weave Together supporters to stand up for a moment. Here are all your witnesses. Yes, I am coping. To cope is to deal effectively with something difficult. This is our coping. To change culture, not accept cultural weakness and ignorance. Weave Together strongly urges the North Shore Central School District to do the following. Make teacher diversification a real priority. There has never been sensitivity training in this school. We need to provide sensitivity training for all staff and administration hosted by the Anti-Defamation League. Currently, there is no protocol for handling discriminatory incidents. We need a protocol that specifically outlines the procedure for handling future discriminatory incidents. We want a mandatory student forum or student convention on the issue of discrimination twice a year. Zero tolerance and firm consequence for the use of any words, symbols, gestures, or similar that represents a denigration of any sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, learning disability, etc. This has gone on too long. The time has come for it to end. Students are no longer silent about violence in schools. Women are no longer silent about sexual harassment. Gender equality is no longer a silent matter. We will no longer allow the denigration of any group of people to be swept under the rug. We are asking you to join us. We don't want words, we want action. Yes, I am graduating in 4 months. Yet I am reminded of the words of Dolores Huerta, civil rights activist and co-founder of the National Farm Workers Union. Every minute, a chance to change the world.
Is that everyone? No? Okay. I was just going to ask, did everyone hand in their statement? Yeah, you got them all? Okay, terrific.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Dr. Craig Wright, pastor of Calvary AME Church, Glen Cove, director of the First Episcopal District Social Action, member of the Long Island, Brooklyn, African American, and Clergy for Social and Rabbi Council for Social Justice. I thank you for allowing me to take a moment of your time this evening. I honor you and I honor your students, and I'm here to tell both of you that you're not alone. A few years ago, I think it's 2005, an author in business penned a book called The World is Flat. His name is Feldman. For those of you who are aspiring to go to college and study business, you may want to read his book, because in the book, Dr. Feldman talks about the global economy. He talks about, again, the world is flat. One more time, the world is flat. And what the purpose of that book was to emphasize the importance of multicultural awareness, cultural competency, sensitivity, and diversity. Why? Because our students, when they leave our comfortable communities, Long Island, 125 homogeneous school districts, when they leave our comfortable communities, they will go into a world full of diversity. And if they're not prepared by their high schools, if they're not prepared by their respective school districts, no matter how valuable their education has been, no matter how high and how standard the curriculum has been, they go underprepared. They go underprepared because there's a deficit in dealing with a Harvard professor who may look like myself or like the Sikh gentleman or student who just spoke. They may be underprepared and underwhelmed if they find themselves not needing to respect someone who may be in a wheelchair, like Dr. Richard Dibble, who is the Director of Labor Relations for NYIT and taught at Cornell. And so, but I'm here to tell you that you're not by yourself. You have a racism not too far away. You have the Holocaust Museum for Education not too far away. I offer you my assistance free of charge because I have a day job. What do I know? Well, I'm a certified EEO investigator. I'm a certified affirmative action officer, certified by Cornell as a pluralism and diversity trainer, among other things. But I say that because it's a shame in this day and age that we have certain things like this, because when you have a hate crime or when you have a bias incident, they're different, or an issue of discrimination, the imperative thing to do, and the response from Albany, the response in DC, the response is that you first go to the person who's been directly impacted. You comfort and secure them of their safety. Second thing you do is you go to those who were indirectly impacted, because everyone didn't say the N-word. Everyone does not have the same degree of sentiment, but silence makes it appear that that person is isolated and that everyone has the sentiment, and that's not true. However, silence can make one fear that there is an issue. In the Chronicle of Higher Education, the recent article, if you go online and Google it, you will see that they talk about the downfall or the pitfalls of college presidents. And the primary reason lately has not been because of financial issues, not been because of enrollment, but because of their lack of response immediately to issues of discrimination and sexual assault and sexual harassment on their respective college campuses. I would surmise that soon that will be dwindling down to the local K-12. I guarantee you. And so what we need to do is to make sure that we have the concerted effort and hear the community. And again, you're not alone. I celebrate each and every one of you. And I know that you're committed. I've had friends who have called from different areas to members of the board. I have friends who have called, and I know that there is an underswelling. But now what needs to happen is that we need to publish what we can, an effort to support and to denounce and to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. Every man, white, black, no matter the nationality, no matter the religion, no matter their orientation, everyone must feel comfortable, unapologetically comfortable. We love you and respect you. I thank you for your space and time. Bless you.
Hi, my name is Ayana Fawcett, and I'm from Seacliff. I was a former student here. I graduated 2 years ago, and I wrote an open letter to the school district. Dear North Shore School District, my name is Ayana Fawcett, and I've been part of your school district since I was at the age of 5 years old, when I first moved here from Seattle, Washington. On June 24th, 2016, I graduated from North Shore High School, and I am currently a sophomore at Siena College. While I am no longer a part of your school district, I do have a few things to say about the way your school chooses to teach our teachers and teach our students. First, though, let me explain to you a little about who I am and my background so you can understand why I'm writing an open letter to you. I'm the middle child of 3 daughters. I have a mom and a dad who go above and beyond our family and would stop at nothing to keep us safe. While, yes, I technically am mixed, my mother is half white and half Jamaican, and my dad is black. If you do look at photos of me, you will say I am black, and that is how I've constantly been labeled in this school district. The black girl who needs to be pulled out of classrooms before class to talk about the subject of the day, who gets to read the articles before class so I get the heads up of a potentially awkward class day, and the girl who everyone looks at to see the reactions after having a discussion about slavery or anything that involves someone who is black. Yet the only reason that all of those classes were made to be so uncomfortable for me was because I was being singled out because out of the hundreds of students at North Shore High School, only a very small amount of them are minority students, and out of that very small number, 2 of them are my sisters. Out of the students who were in my grade, I was the only black student throughout every single year I was put through your school district. Now, let me tell you about some of the experiences I had while attending your high school. Let's start off with my freshman year. As a freshman, you were already being labeled by the upperclassmen and already more nervous to be there than anyone else. It is your first experience as one of the older kids, and it is nerve-wracking enough as it is. Well, a little ways into my freshman year, I was walking to my next class, which was health. As I got to the door, I had noticed that my class was staying outside of the classroom, and I was hoping that meant my teacher was not going to show up and the class was locked. Well, instead, that day we had a substitute teacher, which usually meant your teacher just picked out a random movie last minute, and that's all you were doing that day. Well, on that particular day, the substitute that day told my class to separate, with people who were white on one side of the room and minority students on the other. After this, I blacked out. I do not remember the exact reason for him feeling the need to do this, or if there was even a lesson attached to this, but all I do remember about this experience was feeling ridiculed and feel less than. It was not the kind of day I thought I would end up having, and I was made to feel different than my peers. Now let's move on to my sophomore year of high school. The last year of being underclassmen, a little more pressure because this would be one of the years that counted for college and would challenge you a little bit more with the workload. Well, the instance I am talking about this year is one that forced me to become the spokesman for the entire black community. While I was sitting in the library during an off period, I was approached by a teacher I had my freshman year. What started off as a "how are things going" conversation, it quickly turned into me automatically feeling uncomfortable. This teacher asked me a question I had never really been asked in the past. He asked me what my opinion was about using the N-word. He told me about how he heard one of his students, who was white, singing and talking, and they said the word except with an A ending instead of ER. When he told her to stop, she responded by saying it's okay, because it was ending in A instead of ER, so it didn't count. Apparently, when it ends in an A instead of ER, it doesn't mean anything. While this teacher was just trying to find out where I stood, it made me automatically become the sole source of information into the minds of black people. As a 15-year-old, I barely know how to talk to the doctor without my mom, let alone understand the thoughts that occur throughout the minds of an entire race. Junior year, the most stressful time for most high schoolers. Most important year when it comes to college and beginning your real adult life. Well, for me, in addition to the stress I had already had to deal with, I was back to having to deal with the use of the N-word. While sitting with my friends during lunch, my teacher at the time approached me and asked to talk to me away from my friends. He pulled me aside and handed me an article and said he wanted me to read it before we had class that day. The article had to deal with the question of whether the N-word should be taken out of literature for students. He wanted me to voice my opinion in class because he thought it would be good for the class to hear my opinion. I just felt uncomfortable and said okay and returned to my group of friends. Once I got to class that day, we made a circle with our desk and we began to have a discussion if it was appropriate. It ultimately was a conversation about if there was any severity to using the word, and I spent much of that class silent. It was an experience that was going to once again force me to become the voice I was not ready to have. As I sat back and listened, I noticed that when other students were talking, most would either completely avoid eye contact with me or stare me directly in the eyes when they talked about how wrong the word was. Then I would look around the room and make eye contact with my teacher, who kept making eyes and motions that he meant he wanted me to say something. The moment that I realized I need to say something was the moment a student said that it's not that big of a deal because it's just another word like any other word in the dictionary. Once I heard that, it made me realize how little information is being given to students about the power that word has. It made me think about how in history classes, we never really covered the word and the meaning it had. It was not a part of the history our school wanted to share, but I realized it was something that needed to be covered. How are students going to learn the N-word is such a hateful word if we're not going to teach them of its severity? Senior year, last year of high school before becoming a college student and having new experiences and much more freedom than before. I could not wait to get out of high school and start again in college and meet lifelong friends. While throwing out a piece of trash, one of the lunch monitors came up to me and said she had a question for me. She wanted to know more about Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa, for those who don't know, I also had to look this up myself, is a holiday that is typically celebrated by the African American community to celebrate their heritage and culture. I told her I do not celebrate Kwanzaa, yet she proceeded to ask me more questions about a holiday I knew nothing about. After telling her again, no, I do not celebrate Kwanzaa, she asked me, well, what do your friends do when they celebrate the holiday? But if we're being completely honest here, I grew up in a predominantly white community. In fact, according to a Newsday article about the demographics of race in Long Island school districts for the 2012-2013 school year for North Shore Central School District, 86% of the students are white, 1% of students are black, 5% are Asian, 7% are Hispanic. And so even at 17 years old, I had few to no black friends, let alone did I even know that many other black people besides my family. So when asked what my friends do, I had no idea what to say other than, I do not have friends who celebrate the holiday. You can look it up yourself. Now after thinking about more about the diversity aspect of our school, I decided to go onto the website and see what was being said about diversity in our school district. Now, no matter what device or internet server I used, there were no pictures that would load, and there was a link, though, that said diversity brochure. Yet when I clicked on it, it would come up as server error and file or directory not found. The only thing that I could find on the page was something that said red, respecting each other as equal and different. That is North Shore School District's most detailed explanation on diversity in our towns. And while yes, that is a nice statement, I think that this just shows how little our school district can talk about diversity. There's not even enough diversity in our school district where we can get a real diversity page. Now, you may be wondering why, after almost 2 years out of the North Shore school system, I am just now pointing out flaws in this district's diversity problem. Well, after recently returning from college, I had an interaction with a former classmate of mine, which led me to realize how little this district knows how to teach our students about the extremely demeaning terms used against a group of people. Even after his 13 years through the school system and a year at college, I realized that he still thought it was okay to make a joke about blackface, an extremely racist and offensive costume used to make black people feel inferior and ugly. I'm writing this letter to you now because in the recent months we have a heightened amount of racial stigma and prejudice. It is in times like these where students, teachers, and adults need to be taught about the ways to be more accepting of all races, religions, and identities. If we can begin to increase this kind of teaching and expand the diversity in our teaching staffs, we can lower the number of microaggressions and subtle racist incidents that are constantly happening in these halls. Before I end this letter, I want to assure the community that this is not an attack on every single person who lives in North Shore or every person, teacher or student, in the school system. This is a letter talking about what in general needs to be changed in order to be better students, mainly minority students, who will be going through our school system. In order to make any sort of meaningful change, to the status quo. You need someone to stand up and tell you what is wrong. I do truly believe in the potential that the school district has in becoming a place where all peoples will feel comfortable and with being and showing pride in who they are and the backgrounds that they come from. But the only way for us to get close to that point is to make a difference now. This school district needs a change like this, and it's only going to be possible if we all make a conscious effort to improve our community. I hope this letter gave insight and a different perspective on our district's continued struggle with diversity and inclusion. I am happy to have a healthy discussion with anyone who wants to try and figure out this problem. Thank you.
My name is Raquel Fawcett from Seacliff. I graduated in 2014. When I was a student here at North Shore, I was the only black girl, with the exception of one boy who attended the school for 2 years. I've been here since I was 7, so I grew up within the North Shore district. I ran track. I was definitely a part of the sports program. But one thing I did notice is that regardless of how many friends I made here, how many relationships I made with the teachers, I was constantly judged, not by how smart I was, not by the way I dressed, but my skin color and the way I wore my hair that day. I've been called a nigger numerous times, starting from middle school. I'm now attend Nassau Community College. I'm the president of the student government, and what I've noticed is that it all starts in the North Shore district and all the other districts on Long Island. There is a idea that people bring that it's okay to say nigga or nigger because of the music that is here, and it's not just the black community. There's clearly a Hispanic community, there's the Jewish community, there's a lot of different diversity here. We need to be able to stand up for everyone, regardless of their skin tone, regardless of the clothes they decide to wear that day, regardless of the hair they decide to put on their heads that day. Again, I mean, these are the students that you have here, and they're clearly standing up. And I mean, when I graduated in 2014, there was zero diversity. It's now 2018, and this is the diversity that you have in the high school. So I strongly suggest, as an alumni, someone who still lives on Long Island and who's someone who still plans on being in New York, that you stand up for not only the students that are in your high school, the students that are in your middle school, the students that are in your elementary school, and the kids who plan on moving to this district. Because you are the ones that are representing these students. The student government here are the ones that are representing the student. And again, it always starts with the parents, but honestly, the students are the ones that spend the most time with the teachers. And it all starts with the teachers. You are the ones that teach them how to become the young adults, the men and women that they aspire to be. I know a lot of people want to be teachers, they want to be lawyers, they want to be doctors. It, again, always starts with you guys. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a lot. And the first thing I want to say is thank you. Oh, sure.
Hi, I'm Paul, I'm Paul Sweeney. I live in Glen Cove. I have 4 children, 3 of whom are currently in the district and 1 who already graduated from this district. I just wanted to quickly say, I know you've heard all the eloquent statements of a very disturbing situation here in the school district. I want the board to know that you've heard from students and former students. As a parent, I believe, and if you look around the crowd, there are a lot of other parents here who find it an equally disturbing and unacceptable situation. And I just want to say, if we agree that it's an unacceptable and disturbing situation, inaction is implicitly condoning it. And so I am imploring you to take action. What I've heard tonight is not reflective of what I thought the North Shore School District was and what it is about, and it also is not reflective of the education that I want my children to get while attending this school. district. So again, I just want you to know that there are a lot of parents who are strongly supportive of the statements by the students and are asking this board to do something, please.
My name is Jay Fawcett, also in Seacliff, and I want to say that I've had the opportunity to watch these kids put this together, and it was incredible. It was incredible. Not only the statements that they came up with, not only the reaching out to students, the sort of engagement with staff, the camaraderie. It was amazing. I do a lot of work overseas, and I have the opportunity on many occasions to interact with people from various places, Africa, Asia, South America, all over. And I have to say that regardless as to what you think might be the situation now, you're not training for now. You're not educating for now. You're educating for the future. And if you don't recognize the global world that we live in and the amount of diversity, the amount of color and different orientations and you name it, I deal with it on a regular basis. So the notion that anyone here can't grasp the importance of training for sensitivity, training for global exposure, the languages, the various colors and stripes, if we can't get past this issue, we are putting kids in an untenable position in the future. That's the bottom line. So when I sat in my living room and I watched these kids put this together, what it represented to me was the future. It represented the diversity of the future. It represented the strength of the future. It represented the colors of the future, the orientations of the future. And if we are not in a position to train our children, whether it be in the public forum, in an education forum, or whether it be as a parent, to understand that what they face is not going to look like North Shore. It's not going to look like Long Island. 90% of the under 30 age population exists in India and Africa and Asia. Those are the places in Asia and Africa. That's where most of the under 30 age population exists. We're getting old in the US. They have to deal with these other people. We're not going to be able to sustain a situation where we just talk to ourselves. We are not going to be able to be insular any longer. So I am touched when I see young people leading, but I'm even more touched when I see that they understand what exposure means, that they understand the notion of acceptance. And I think as parents, we are tired of this getting swept under the rug. This deserves exposure. It deserves to be addressed. It deserves consequences when we don't reach for those diverse values. We don't reach for respect for each other. And students need to understand that if you can't deal with different colors and different stripes now, you can't deal with your future. That's the bottom line. So as parents, I want to echo what Paul said. This is an absolutely necessary thing, and if this doesn't change, we are doing our children a disservice. Thank you.
Please let us study first.
Okay. Well. Oh.
Hi, I'm Helen Jang, and I'm from Roslyn Harbor. I am an Asian American. Just to emphasize the American. I only came to this school district halfway through my freshman year, and I'm a senior now, so essentially I've only been here for 3 years. But in those 3 years, I've experienced so much racism, not only towards me, but to my friends as well. I want to start off by saying I appreciate every single student that asked me about my culture. I love sharing my culture. I love that I'm Chinese, and I don't mind it. But the problem I have with, I guess, the school district is when people aren't respectful to my culture. And that's fine, we can always teach them. But I always knew that when someone would be disrespectful to my culture, because I'm Asian, nothing would happen. And when my fellow classmate, Danielle, got called the N-word, it kind of reinforced that thought I had in me, that even if I were to say something, nothing would happen. And even now that I'm saying something, I don't know if something is going to happen. I hope to see in the next years that something does happen, and I want things to change, and I really do. I see middle schoolers when I go on the school bus. There's more Asians, and it makes me happy, because when I started off here, there was only one other Asian girl. I want the Asian Americans growing up in the middle school and the elementary school to have a person to talk to when something like this happens. I am quite an average student, I would like to say, and I've been labeled. I had someone tell me, because we have senior superlatives, I think that is what it's called, that I should be the one that checks the portal the most. Why did that happen? Thank you.
Okay. We done? Thank you. Thank you so much. I am blown away by what I hear from our students. I'm deeply saddened and quite emotional about it. So I'm going to keep my comments short, but I'm going to say that I'm incredibly proud of all of you for coming and speaking to us. I'm excited to look out and see all of your faces here. I really, really am. For a long time, I've known this district is changing, and we want to change with you. And I want us to work together to bring the sensitivity training all the way up to us. We need to do it too. So not just within our students, but our faculty, our administrators, and even the Board of Education. We too need it. We too live here. We too see things that, I see things personally that make me tremendously uncomfortable. Not in the schools, outside the schools, socially. And I don't know how to deal with it, because I don't know how to say, don't say that. So, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you. I really feel I've rarely witnessed something as powerful as what we saw tonight. Gosh, I'm so sorry.
She said she wouldn't be the emotional one. I want you all to know.
I said I could do this. I think the board has plenty to support what you've been saying, in that I think we saw indicators from the equity study that we conducted in the past that pointed in the direction of what you were saying, but not nearly as clearly. So we've been concerned, and your testimony was incredibly powerful. And I'll say that too, that you were so articulate tonight that honestly, even for someone sort of, on this side of the podium, I think you really reframed for me some of my own experiences and gave me a different way to think about some of the things that I've, experienced in my own family's life and the things that I've seen. I think most importantly, your request, and I think it was Danielle that outlined them very specifically, were specific. And I feel that they felt very doable. We can, is there a detail we need to discuss? I won't say no, the board's gonna obviously have this discussion. But I am grateful for such a concrete, accomplishable list of things we can do. I know I've thought about things we could do, but to hear it from you was important. And I would only add to their list, and I tried very desperately to get it down, that I'd like to add to that, that I've been thinking, do we need an adult who works in the schools who has this specific role and I don't know how we want to call it. Is this a chief diversity officer? And I'm not implying it's a full-time position, but that's someone who's truly responsible. Possibly we want to think of it as being responsible for student voice, right? I think that very much fits with what we're doing. But that, and of course, someone that students have confidence in. I think that's got to be part of it. And I will leave it to our superintendent if you want to talk any about the conversations we've been having over the past couple of days in terms of significant goals for the districts and the fact that, and you want me to let you do that, or?
I can do it, or you can do it. It's up to you.
Oh, I think you might be better able to articulate it, but we've spent a tremendous amount of time on strategic planning and goal setting. And when forced to, prior to this evening, forced to narrow down those goals to just 3 things that we could accomplish, say, over the next 5 years, of the 3, diversity was one of those 3 as a very, very pressing need that we absolutely felt we had to address. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. I know this is a difficult topic, but any organization has a CEO, and that CEO is our superintendent. And as you know, this is his first year on the job. I think he has, in some instances, tried to reach out. There is an administrative role, and there's, a Title IX officer, and then that Title IX officer reports to the principal, and the principal reports to the superintendent. And I would really ask, I know that from what you've said, that you've experienced that it hasn't been responsive, but if it's not responsive on the first level, to go to the next level, and to give our superintendent the opportunity to put into place what he feels is appropriate for protocols. Just let me finish. This is, okay. So he is really in charge of the district. It's our job, if he's not doing his job, to supervise the superintendent. But we went through a very, very long and arduous process in picking our superintendent. We spent months doing this, and we have faith that he can come forward and address the issue, and I would ask that you work with him and who he designates in addressing the incidents, the larger issues, the protocols, because he's the one with boots on the ground who this is his role in the district.
Okay. Herman?
Tonight was absolutely awesome, but really it's just a start
And what I'm asking everyone here is to hold us accountable, hold us continuously accountable for the change that needs to take place in the district. Zero tolerance on sexual harassment, much greater diversity in the faculty, teacher training, a proper protocol, zero tolerance, measurable goals. Don't make this just a moment in time, because that won't get you the results you're looking for. Hold us continuously accountable. We will try to rise to the occasion. Very important that we do so. But don't let us off the hook. Keep pushing, keep doing the advocacy that you're doing tonight. We will try and do the right thing.
Anybody else on the board?
Joanna?
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I want to particularly thank the young people who spoke tonight for their bravery and their courage, not only for speaking up tonight, but for having your experience and sharing your experience with us. I will make a commitment to all of you that I feel the pain of your stories, and I am deeply committed to righting the ship, and I give you that commitment.
Oh, Dave.
So, I think this is too loud. So as a board member, one of the things that I find makes me typically less effective is when I bring my own experience and my own family's experience into the way that I look at this district. But as I hear your stories today, I think about the time I was at the bus stop with the same kids. I was there for 10 years, and 2 of them were talking without me that day. And when I finally said, guys, why are you not talking to me? And they said, well, my mom said I had to break up with this girl because she was Jewish, and my parents didn't allow me to do that. Or I think about the time at my first job when I was excited and feeling independent, and I bought stamps from the office manager, and that person said to me, you know, this is a long time ago, so stamps were nothing, but whatever it was, I had like 15 cents coming back to me, and I said, oh no, that's okay. And she said, and I still remember it, quote, what kind of Jew would you be if you didn't take the change? And other examples that I can give. And so as I sit here and I think about my own experience, I didn't feel like I had the ability or the community to get together and speak up and make the kind of statement that was made today. And I think that is how you bring change. I think one thing the Reverend Doctor said that really stuck with me is that you are not alone, we are not alone, we are here together as a community. I understand there is tremendous difference in this community, but for me up here, I don't like you or they. I prefer we, and I think that's the way we have to look at it, and that's the way I'm going to be looking at it. And I'm appreciative of the other commitment I've heard from this board, and I too am very appreciative of what was said here today. So thank you, everyone.
Rich, do you want?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for the presentation you made tonight. It was extremely powerful, well thought out, and my perspective, I think, is a little bit different because I know a lot of you personally from interactions in my former career. Some of you have been at my kitchen table, and I feel badly for a lot of reasons, but I think part of it is you, by coming forward and doing this, you're making more people aware of problems that some people really just sort of overlooked and didn't really think about much. Now it's out in the open, and we will pledge to do whatever we can do to try and make things better. Thank you.
Thank you all very, very much for being here. This was a remarkable moment for us as a community, and it's hard for me to piece together all of your stories in this one moment because I really want to understand them better. and as a person who, like all other people at the table here, as a person who has been the subject of being othered over the course of my life, as a person who has been marginalized in various contexts within my own life, I understand your stories. I understand the value of your stories. I don't understand your story without really sitting and talking with you about them, but they are important to me, and they ought not to be minimized in any way. And so I think what we know to be true is that words have great power, and actions have even more power. So, what will we do next? I think that in your action plans, you have offered us some very compelling things to think about, and I will study them very carefully. Obviously, we want to spend some time really thinking about them with you and among our faculty and our staff and our administrators, and have this not be that maybe we put more into this work and expand it, but it needs to be very pervasive. I do want to, as Trustee Jones had mentioned, over the past couple of days, we've spent many hours working through strategic planning, surveys, and interviews and focus groups, and what were the major themes that arose from that. And we had, just for context, we had 2,700 people take our survey, including many students. The lion's share of them were our students. And of the three most important concepts that arose out of our work over the past couple of days, this work was of the most important and has risen to one of our strategic targets. So I didn't bring them tonight to read to you, because I didn't know so many of you were going to be here, but they are in draft form, and I would like to read them to you so you know what the thinking of the district is and the core planning team, and where my values are as your school leader. And so the draft, and please know that these words may change a little bit, but the sentiment will remain. Given that a culture of connection and a sense of belonging are foundations for a healthy school community, we will build a safe environment that emphasizes acceptance, equity, inclusivity, cultural competency, and a respectful, open exchange of ideas for all learners. So what will happen after, that's a big target that we will seek to achieve over the course of time. And so what will happen next is that we will have a series of actionable steps that we will design to help us achieve those things. Those will happen within the next probably 4 to 6 weeks. And I believe that Weave Together has a seat at that table to do that with me. So I would like to invite you to join me in this work. So what I will do next is I want to do some thinking. You've given me an awful lot to think about tonight, and I tend to be a person who benefits from time and reflection, and so I would like to have that. I would also like does your group have an executive board, or do you have a leadership? It's this group here. Okay, so just show me who you are, right? Okay. All right, so there are 7 of you. All right, so what I need to have happen, like in very short order, is I need you guys to get on my calendar. Okay. And so before you leave tonight, there will be a little bit of breaking of sorts, I suppose, here. So we're going to take a break. I think we all need a break. What I would like the 7 of you to do is just stop in with Mrs. Campy right here, who is my assistant, and we will get you on my calendar either this week or next week, okay, early in the week, and we will work together to think about what is the next best right step to take in all of this. And then I will ask that you join me again at our next board meeting on the 29th, and we can talk together about what it is that we will do to move this work forward. Does that make sense? Right? And is that something the board
Yes.
is okay
Yes,
with? Okay.
thank you.
So let's just do some thinking and some brainstorming together about what we think is the next thing to do. And guys, I have to tell you, there is no more powerful or impactful or compelling voice in our organization than all of you. And I want you to know as you leave here tonight that while I think we can agree that the organization is far from perfect, that I will stand shoulder to shoulder with you and do everything I can do to make this experience better every single day. Okay? So fight the good fight, and I will look forward to having you join me as soon as we can make that happen. Okay, so thank you all very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break, trustees, and then we have a lot to cover, trustees, so not too long, seriously. We'll have another section of another public comment section, but it's not for a while. We have a lot of business to get through. But you guys are coming back in 2 weeks, right? Yeah. All right. Okay, thanks. Okay.
So whoa, now I'm screaming. Okay. So we're putting those lists together, and then the way that 20% payroll, those are the payroll taxes that are, so that's the FICA and the Social Security and all that stuff. We'll break that out and show you how that's calculated.
Right.
But we'll put that in the next board letter for you.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, sorry. So that was the treasurer's report. All in favor? All right, let's move on to the report of the superintendent.
Why, hello.
Why, hello.
That would be you. That would be me, right? All right. So, few things that I'm going to have to ad-lib this here because we've done some of this, right? But that was really terrific.
It was.
So tonight's a really busy night in North Shore. We had our musicians here, if you weren't here for that. And we had our high school students here to speak with us on these issues of really great import, and I look forward to working with all of them. So a few updates on our safety and security work from our last meeting. So our request for Nassau County to conduct the review of our facilities, that was approved this week. And we are in the process of scheduling that evaluation. So we'll keep the board apprised of that. Tonight I'll be recommending that Altaris Consulting Group be engaged to conduct our comprehensive district-wide audit of our facilities, our policies and our practices, our professional development for our staff in this area, and the ability to provide project management for some of the ensuing work that occurs. After our meeting tonight, we can schedule that initial meeting, and then what I would say in terms of as we move into the budget of finances, like what will we do, as the board will adopt the budget at the next meeting, we will just keep in mind that we have been talking about the feasibility of possible bond work in the fall, in which case some of the heavy duty facilities work can be included in that. And then we also have monies in reserve that we might be able to access if we wanted to do things right away. So I don't want the board to feel alarmed or pressured into making any financial decisions. We have time for the board to make those. I would also say that we have had several meetings with our POP officers. POP stands for Problem-Oriented Policing, and we have two officers assigned to the North Shore schools. They are making a more regular presence at the schools on even when there's nothing going on, and we think that's important that that children, when they see police officers, don't always equate that with a problem, that there is value in having these partnerships. So they've been at the schools. They have been working very closely with me. They provided training to our principals and our assistant principals and our security staff on Monday afternoon, and we have some follow-up trainings that are scheduled as well. The presentations have been scheduled. So last time I talked to you about visitor management systems and anonymous reporting systems. So we have identified some vendors that will come and make a presentation to myself and Olivia and John and some of our technology folks, and we'll start to make those recommendations on that. And then the work to install the infrastructure and equipment necessary for the two-way walkie-talkie communication. That is in the budget transfer that the board will take action upon tonight, and as soon as that we have the board's approval, that work is poised to begin tomorrow. I was in the Victorian House yesterday working on the strategic plan with a group of folks, and it was at 10 o'clock during the student walkout, and I wanted to just make a note and say that how impressed I was with the statement and the impactful nature in which our student body went about showing voice and giving import to an issue that's important to them. And whether you agree with which amendment is more important is not important in this discussion. What is most important to me in this discussion is that we enable our students space to be able to speak their minds in a respectful way that gives honor to their issues. And I would say that without exception, our students did that very well yesterday, both at the middle school and the high school. So I wanted to, if Emily and Lindsay were here, I would say it to their face. I said it to them privately before. I was really thankful for the seriousness that the students brought to this, and the honor of the message. It was really pretty humbling to be here to watch that. And then lastly, on safety and security, I just want the board and the community to be on the lookout for a community event that I am starting to put together. I don't have a date set, I don't have a format set, but it is definitely coming, and I would say it's definitely coming before the break. Some conversation, presentation on all of these issues.
You have confused looks over there.
I'm like, an event?
On
An
the
event of what?
On the 20th, I've been talking to, so people have been asking me to host some kind of community event with the police, with the administration, with myself. What are we doing so we can keep people informed? And so I am open to that. And we are talking about a format with which to do that. And I think that should be done. A lot of schools are doing it.
Like a listening session to the community.
Like
and
a listening
safety
section,
right.
or here's where we are, because not every look we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 people in the audience here who are having the benefit of knowing what's
Sure.
happening very discreetly.
Sure.
But if we were to advertise something to say we are going to have a conversation and presentation on the efforts that we've taken thus far and what we plan to do next, we think we would reach a wider audience. So the concept hasn't been fully formed yet, the date hasn't been identified yet, but this is something that I hear a lot about from parents, and I think it will be important to have a place where we can sort some of this stuff out.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
I wanted to, as I mentioned before, we had about 2,700 students, teachers, community members take our strategic planning survey. They were enormously helpful, and over the past couple of days, we worked to build these draft goals that will drive our work in social emotional learning, in what we are calling contemporary teaching and learning. So it's hard to sort of get to that 21st century learning, drive for 21st century learning when you're almost halfway through the 21st century. So we would like to be a little bit more aspirational than that. And as I mentioned before, really fostering safe and equitable environments for all students around acceptance and equity and respect. So I'm pretty excited. What will happen next is we'll have 3 action planning teams. They will build the action steps that will happen to help us get to these great big goals. So we are definitely widening our participation in those groups. If members of the board wish to participate on any of those 3 groups, you are welcome to do so. Just let me know and we'll get you assigned to a team where your interests lie. Okay. And then lastly, the final review of our budget will occur this evening, and it will be presented to the board for adoption on March 29. Tonight we'll review staffing, employee benefits, revenue sources, some revenue projections, and then we'll take the board's final direction setting points tonight, prepare a final document for you, and then we'll also be talking a little bit, not a little bit, as much as the board wishes to talk tonight, about the transportation ridership study as it relates to students in grades 9 through 12, and then make a determination about the capital reserve fund that the community allowed you to create, and now starting to use that work in the phases that have been established. So with that said, I'm going to stop and turn it back to the board.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Welcome.
very much. But now I'm going to turn it back to you to do the budget discussion.
All right.
Oh yeah, do you need the screen down, Peter?
I'm not even sure. Probably yes. At this point, yes. So the board the board has a revised page 45 or 46 from the last meeting.
Yeah, I have it.
Okay, so
Get
that,
it? Yep.
great.
Which one are the last pages? 445. It's the community services page.
Okay. Okay, so what we are doing, what we will seek to do tonight is review our staffing numbers, our employee benefits, the use of the debt service, revenue and finance sources, and then the use of fund balance. And then we had talked the last time about moving our discussion of revenue projections. So what I think makes the since it is up on the screen, we can look at those revenue projections. And so the board had asked me to, and asked Olivia and I to take a look at, in the aggregate, what some of these, what these revenues would might look like over the course of 5 years. So this is very much a thought experiment in many ways, and so we pick some assumptions and we try to move them through. And what I wanted to do is just have the board ask us any questions about this. What you'll see is the approved budget in 17-18 reflects revenue of $17,624,940. And so the balance of that comes from from the taxes that we levy. So what is not what we don't raise here is raised in taxes. So as you forecast this out, when we get to 2022-23, we project revenue of 18.472 million. So it's not a major. So you can sort of start to make that draw the conclusion that the rate of growth of our revenue will not likely match the rate of growth of some of our hardwired expenses in terms of contract obligations and health insurance and the like. So did the board have any questions on this that Olivia and I might be able to help you out with?
I'm tempted to ask only the impossible question. So
I
this
would
was
have-
terrific.
Thank you.
No, I greatly appreciate this. We have not had this before. This is hard to do. We clearly laid out the assumptions that had to go into this kind of calculus. So it's all very helpful. So then the question, of course, becomes, what's the tax cap going to be, right? And that's going to really start to change because we're suddenly in an environment where inflation is starting to pick up. And obviously the tax cap formula is vastly complicated. And so, obviously we don't have a projection on what the maximum tax levy could be.
Right. Let me speak to that for 10 seconds, right? So that becomes very complicated to do. So you just have to sort of pick an assumption and then run with it for whatever length of time you'd want to run with it. The hardest part of calculating or projecting at the CPI is that the CPI for the year gets published based on the monthly CPI that gets published. So that number actually changes every single month, and so it would be very, very hard to figure that out. We could pick a number and run it through. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We could, but since we're now in the situation where in years past, we were looking at 2% or CPI, whichever was less. Right? And that was CPI. And now the tables have turned, right? So now we're going to be looking at 2% or CPI, whichever is left, and it's going to be 2%. I defer to the economist, but he's giving me the nod. But it won't really be 2% because growth factor and these other kinds of things. And we could pick a number. And so one of the ways you could look at this, since we don't know what will be, is that kind of back-end analysis, right? Like if you have the 5-year budget projections, right, which historically we've had. And I've got the ones that we did last year. Last year we did 5-year budget projections that gave us numbers, right, with many assumptions, carefully detailed, that went out through I guess it was 2021 is what Olivia's given us last year. So if we have those and then we have these revenue projections and you do the back end math, what would the tax cap have to be to get us to those projections? My cocktail napkin math says you'd need 3.5, right? Which isn't likely and is concerning. And so it's this, so in part I feel like it's this very big picture that we need to work with, right? Even with the assumptions, right? Because as long as we know what assumptions we're making, we can have the conversation. It's like, here's the revenue, here's the budget, and those numbers are looking very difficult. What does it mean? That means something different could mean something different to everybody on the board. To me, it means I'm going to be very concerned about the gap between the tax levy we set this year and the allowable tax limit, because, as we've talked about a lot of times in the past, if it's a $5 gap, it's $5 the school district does not have access to forever compounded. And so that's my concern. And I don't think my math is fantastic, but it doesn't have to be that exact to be like, So that's what I've got. I think that was uplifting. Okay.
Marianne?
There are a number of factors that make it so difficult to predict. You are right, every time you're below the tax cap, that does have a ramification in a multiple factor going forward. But you don't know what the enrollment is going to be. You don't know what TRS is going to look like. There are any number of factors that may change what our budget is going 5 years forward. But I think it sort of reinforces the point that we've been talking about from the beginning with this, is that we really have to look at, what we're doing programmatically and what we can afford going forward based upon the worst case, scenario going forward. So I think it's important to bear in mind that as we go forward, there may be a deficit, and we may have to make difficult choices. So I think it just really calls on the administration when doing curriculum planning, to really have a long-term outlook as best they can in staffing changes. And we'll have to look at things like administration and where we could tighten things up and where we, programs. I mean, none of the choices are any that we really want to have to make, but if it comes down to it, we'll do it on the recommendation of our administration.
Herman?
I mean, I think there's going to be more uncertainty in the next 5 years than any of us can anticipate, and a state aid formula that goes up 2% a year is, I think, not necessarily going to be accurate. We don't know the impact of the tax reform. We know that hidden in the tax reform was a cutback in health care for disadvantaged individuals, which impacted hundreds of thousands of people in New York and has a very large dollar total. So I believe that going ahead, we actually could have substantially less state aid. We're a very well-to-do district, and I think that's going to require some serious adjustment of our budget. I hope I'm wrong, but what happened in Washington will have, I think, a very significant and negative effect on New York, and probably was designed with that in mind. So I think we have to be very cautious in terms of the years ahead. There may be much more adjustment necessary than any of us can anticipate at this moment in time.
Okay. Dave, did you have a comment?
I had still talking about revenue, but a different direction, which is more of a micro question, although it does have to do with assumptions and CPI, which is about the pilot calculations. I know that on the pilot 2, it's very tied to the CPI, whereas pilot 4 is sort of more flat. I don't know, Olivia, I'm sure you know how this goes to some degree. If you could just explain, just for me and I guess for the camera, how that's calculated and how you feel comfortable kind of growing at that rate going forward 6-7 years.
Like Herman said, that you have to adjust as you go along. It is almost impossible for me to project anything beyond this year. And because we are now dealing with what I call a prepaid card, instead of those days when we did the budget and we listed what we want and then we came up with a revenue and the rest of it came from taxation. Doesn't work that way. So there are so many parts of it. And we should also remember that next year is the last year of most of the contracts. So there's a big, and labor cost is more than 80%, with benefits 80% of the budget. So that's what makes figuring this out a little more difficult than normal.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's move on.
Okay.
Yep.
So the sources of revenue that we have coming in are just getting to the page, I'm sorry. So if you look at page, if you go to section A3 of your budget book on page 3, and it's actually all on this chart as well if you want to stay there, but so what we have coming in terms of to offset the expense side of the budget. Okay, is everybody ready?
Yep.
Okay, great. So if you look at the 18-19, we have split properties, $150,000. Then all the pilots that we just talked about. State aid still, the state aid number of 5.2 million still remains an estimate. That will become a harder number once the executive, the governor and the legislature come to terms on a budget. That should be happening within the next week or two, we hope, and we will keep you posted. Money's also, our revenue also comes in from adult education, tuition for special education. So we have in the budget, you've seen the St. Christopher's money that comes in, that's unique to North Shore, where we have the St. Christopher School in our district. We have to pay that tuition for them to attend, but we also take that back in as revenue, so it is an offset expense. Interest on our investments, miscellaneous receipts, our rental of property, and then we're bringing in some fund balance. So we have $1.2 million that we're bringing in from the 2017-18 budget to offset the tax levy in 18-19. We are bringing in more money from the Marcelino and Levine grants. We've talked about this, so that has. The use of that reserve has spiked up to, was as high as $1 million last year, and now it's time to start bringing that down very gradually over time. So if you were at my initial budget presentation, which you all were at, we talked about that melting ice cube approach. That's how we want to use reserves. So by the time the reserve is expended, you will have never felt the impact of it being gone, because we will have decreased our dependence on that. So that's $800,000, and then we are starting to use the money that was in a tax tertiary reserve that was liquidated and put into the unrestricted as a separate line, and so we'll start to use that over time, and we're starting that with a $350,000 use of that reserve. And if you go deeper into the narrative, you'll see the projected use of that reserve over time. And then we are consistent with this year. We're also bringing $1.2 million from our employee retirement system reserve as well. So all together, this is the recommendation is to use $18,781,973. If the state aid numbers go up, and they usually do, what I might suggest that we do is give some consideration to offsetting that. The current year operation number from 1.2 million down a little bit, so we don't have to rely so much on fund balance going into the next budget cycle for the following year. So that's the revenue picture. If there are any questions.
Just so I understand, so if the revenue from the state is increased, it will be offset in your recommendation by use of reserves, as opposed to potentially going closer to the full.
I wouldn't take it from. I would still continue to use the reserves that we've recommended here. I'd still continue. I would still recommend using the $800,000. And where I would suggest that we take it from is that first line, the current year's operations.
So it's like the fund balance,
That $1.2 million, that fund balance number that we carry
Gotcha.
forward. Right.
Because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It's almost impossible to give it up, because we've used it for so many years going forward, and we
Right.
put part of it in your capital reserve and part of it going forward. So the budget is almost built in with this presumption
Yes.
of $1 million coming from a fund balance, which we may not have the luxury for 5 years down the road.
Right. And so that impacts our spending decisions over the year, right? So that,
Right.
there comes a point in time when we stop, where we freeze purchase orders because we're paying attention to what we need in fund balance at the end of the year. Absolutely.
And although Olivia,
Dave.
you do have a downward projection of that line in
Yes.
these projections, so at least.
So if we reduce it then it gives us a little bit of, in fact, it balances out with what we would not have in the cash gap too.
Okay. Use less, have more.
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I think debt service is probably an easy one for us to do. If we go to section D 48.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes. Actually, you know what? That's a good point.
back to benefits?
Let's go to employee benefits and do D 46, 47 first. Let's tab toward the back.
I have words like gulp and ugh written all over the section. Not all over it, but.
Well, yeah. I have a technical question, if it's okay.
Please.
That I think Olivia will just have no problem with, because I think I ask it every year because I can't remember. So, for example, first section, ERS program, ERS administration, ERS capital, right? And these have slightly different, I guess those are object codes, .800, .801, .802. Could you explain to everyone the difference between those? I'm most interested in, what the capital part means, how this gets broken into three parts. Because
Yes.
some of them are broken into
Actually-
three parts, and of course some just two.
Yeah, there's a backup to each one of these numbers because we look at each employee. If you are, it depends on your title. If you are, say, buildings and grounds, the buildings and grounds employee are classified as capital. So all the benefits related to people in buildings and grounds go into that line. Aides are instructional, so they go into the first line. And anyone clerical is administration. Those are the ones that are in the 4801 object code.
Okay, so it is, you're saying capital in the sense of the capital plant?
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And so some categories, like the next one, TRS,
You can
there's only
see that
program and administration, because, right, there's no
It's
in building and
administration
grounds
and
in that.
teachers
Right.
only.
Thank you.
I just want to point out for the public, not those of you here, but those of you probably watching, that the ERS and the TRS numbers are numbers that come down to us from the state. We don't have control over those numbers. It's shocking to me what a 12% return on investment in most pension funds that the TRS is going up. I only consume that the actuarial calculation they're using is because of an aging population and a decreasing workforce, because I'm sure that's a question that everyone will have. 12%, why does it go up? Well, it's not just the return on investment. There's a whole actuarial calculation that's based on the demographics.
And they'll also use a 5-year, they look at a 5-year scenario, and sometimes they have to adjust it back and forth. So because they look at it over a long period of time, it may not necessarily work in correlation to how the market is doing.
What's their presumed rate of return, you told me last year, on their investments?
This year, I don't recall what they are.
What they utilize in their...
Yes.
Okay, but it's over a life of 20 years. So if people think that their presumed rate of return, it's usually around 7.5 with most pension plans.
Yeah.
I don't know what they use here.
I think it's 7 or 8%. That's
8
what
is
we-
high. It's usually
yes.
around 7, 7.5 for most pension
Correct.
plans. But that's a 20-year life. So even though it's, you got 12% this year, that has to calculate in the years like 2008 where there were huge negative returns on the market.
So what you find in these lines, and they're big. Joanna, did you have a question? No, I'm sorry. So what you find in these lines are big tickets. So the draft budget is $26 million in employee benefits. This is our retirement system, our Social Security payments, our workers' compensation, our life insurance program, our health insurance program, our unemployment insurance, all. We have 2 page 46s. Our long-term disability and our dental insurance. So all of that. So it's a huge number, but it supports all of the benefits for almost 800 of our employees. And as Marion, you mentioned, most of this we don't have much control over. Okay, are there any other questions?
Let's go to
It's one of
debt
those
service.
things.
I know it's hard to. Yeah. Okay, so if we turn the page and we look at the debt service and interfund transfers, that's on page D48. And this is also not that many lines of the budget. The total debt service that we use amounts to $4.264 million. And that has, these are all of our debt service, special aid fund transfers, and lease payments on our energy performance contracts. And tax anticipation notes, $60,000. Sarah.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to chat about the tax anticipation notes.
Sure.
It's a fascinating topic. So, I mean, for the past several years, right? Like, in the past couple of years in October, we've gotten these tax anticipation notes. It's been $5 million, right? We go out for these.
Yes.
They're done in June.
It depends on the fund balance at the end of the year. That's what, determines how much we want to borrow.
Right, but
Yes.
certainly the past 2 years, but I think longer than that, it's been $5 million. This is because we have a tax levy, the town's supposed to give us taxes, and we're waiting for them, right?
Yes.
So this is a cash flow issue, right? First of all, the budget line
God
does
bless
seem
you.
high, so maybe we're planning something there that I don't know about. Like, actual expenditure last year, it says, was 38, and it seems like our towns have been very consistent, so I'm not sure why the budget line is higher this year. But the other thing is because of the tax bill, we had this bizarre situation where people were bombarding the receiver's offices to pay their taxes early, and school taxes were this very unusual subset where the tax had already been levied and existed, and you absolutely could go ahead and pay your second half whenever you wanted to. So I haven't seen anything from Town of Oyster Bay, but Town of Hempstead said, we have the money, we're going to release it to the schools early, there's no reason not to, we couldn't keep the interest anyway, it belongs to the schools. So, I feel like we should talk to Town of Oyster Bay if we could please have our money, because then we would not have to borrow.
You should see Herman's face.
Yeah, because then we would not have to borrow $5 million, which is not,
Great.
nothing. And apart from the cost of borrowing the money, right, anytime you go out with the tax anticipation notes, the bonds or whatever, like you're paying bond counsel, et cetera, another like
Sure.
$18,000 just to have the privilege of going out and getting money from people until the Town of Oyster Bay decides to let us have the money. And my only hesitation, I mean, it seems like, right, never hurts to ask. We should certainly have this conversation. The only weird thing about it is that, let's say, they say yes, and we don't have to go out for a tax anticipation note this year. The way the state controller, and I'm sure you've all read this, calculates those fiscal stress scores, the consistency of your borrowing is much more important than the amount of the borrowing, right? So if you borrow 555 and then you have a year in which you don't borrow, and then of course you have to go back and borrow again because no one thinks everybody's paying their taxes early next year, you get a little, you can get a little funkiness in your fiscal stress score. We, of course, have our score is no designation, meaning, right, we didn't rack up enough points to have any fiscal stress. I think it was really no points on fiscal stress and maybe only 3 points on like environmental stress.
Five.
Which had to do with like how valuations of property change and stuff. So, and we're talking out of a big scale. So even if you take a hit on that in terms of your fiscal stress, it's still real money that you save. These are my thoughts on TANs.
I think
Town of Oyster Bay is the one who has the cash and would hand it over to you.
I think what we have to look at is the tax anticipation notes has nothing to do with how we, in this particular instance, because they are not going to give us more than we levy. And we do use most of the money before June. This year, the only difference is that they upfronted the money. They gave it to us a little bit early. January, they gave us a lot of money. And so what we did was we called a couple of banks. We got some RFPs, and we were able to invest it at maybe a few basis points higher than we usually do. That was the only advantage of it. But it doesn't impact what we have to borrow, because the tax anticipation note is, like you said, is for cash flow purposes, and it's for the September and October payroll, and the taxes don't start coming in until the end of October. So we will still need to borrow. It will not prevent us from borrowing.
This is an insane system.
It's the first half of the year that we're borrowing for. We're not borrowing for the second half
No, we are not borrowing
of this
for the-
fiscal year. We're borrowing for the because the taxes aren't due till the end of September.
Correct.
So they're not released to the district to the end of October.
Correct.
It doesn't help you that people paid early now.
It's a crazy system. And I mean, truthfully, like when you're talking about a $100 million budget, $5 million is not, right, we're not talking about in the context, but
it's a crazy
The only help is it will give us a little more interest income this year. That's all.
Okay. Let's
Okay,
move on.
let's move on. Okay, so actually the very last part of our budget review is the staffing that we wanted to go through. I'm sorry, I keep touching your. Okay, you're good? All right. So let me just pull something.
We made copies. It's not here.
I got nothing. I got Advil. What's that? Did you talk to John?
No. We made copies. We made copies.
this is the second round, so
We have copies.
there's also honorable mention, right? Yeah. No one from North Shore did any better.
Oh, really?
It's as good.
Good.
It's good.
Okay. Good.
Allison only had like, Allison only had one second place. She didn't have anybody go.
Judged 5 times. Jesus.
It's good. Allison got into a public fight with the people that run it.
Okay, so let me shift how we're doing this. So the board has before you a summary of FTEs by code that we went through in the folder that I gave you earlier. Okay.
We're so modern.
I know, I'm a modern guy. It's with the paperclip, yes.
This is the point in the evening where we get punchy.
It's with the paperclip. I understand that, but okay. So you have one superintendent of schools.
Just one?
Just one.
Okay.
So what we've for today. So what we've done here for your staffing report is we've gone through the broad categories of administration, our non-instructional supervisors, clerical facilities. You just sort of broken this out by code. So you'll see that There are 28 administrators, and we've done this in 17, 18, 18, 19. So there are 28 administrators in 2017, 18, and we are recommending 28 administrators in 2018, 19. Again, non-instructional supervision, that's our assistant business manager, director of buildings and grounds, and our supervisor of transportation. That remains flat at 3. And then, so as you go through, you see that these numbers are flat through our clerical staff. We are reducing a half-time. So confidential and clerical, those are all of our secretaries, and then we have a small number of confidential secretaries. Betty is one. Lois Straber is another. It means they are exempt from. They are exempt from the clerical contract. They're not in the union. Okay. That's what it means, yes.
You are privy to confidential.
It's called management confidential. That's,
Clever name.
it's what civil service calls it, yes. We could probably come up with a better, yeah,
There's a reason for it.
right.
So the administrators line, I know for this year going forward, it is what it is, but that would be something I would like to look at in future years. We've added net 7 new administrators since I'm here on the board. I would, not that everyone's not doing their job, I'm sure they are, and I'm sure there's value, but I would think in looking at other districts, but I don't know this, and I think it's a point that we might discuss. Other districts don't have as many administrators. Maybe we want to look at if push comes to shove, and there's places where we eventually need to cut. We may want to look at our administrative structure and see if there's a more streamlined way to do that.
Sure. So when you get to the bottom of this, you'll see that we are down 5.8 instructional personnel for next year. That's not teachers. We have teacher aides that we're reducing 4 teacher aides across the school district, and then the net of the teacher reductions is 1.8 across all the schools. That's all the adds and all the subtracts. What that is related to primarily are the three reductions at the elementary level are the primary driver there, and that is largely due to enrollment. So we have 4 sections of 5th grade leaving Glen Head and 3 coming in, and again 4 leaving in Glenwood Landing, and we're projecting 3 coming in. And then Seacliff, we're collapsing a section of rising 5th grade from 3 to 2. Those sections, as you know, will run at in cohorts of 2 sections of 22 versus 3 sections of 14 and 15. Okay, so that's where those come from, and then we have.
The 1.8 reduction, going from 331 to 330.8.
331. Actually, that calculation is incorrect. So it is actually 0.8.
0.8. Yeah.
0.2 rather. 0.2. Thank you.
It's 1.2.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's something wrong. Yeah.
I wanted to say that.
Wait, it's 0.2?
Point 2.
1 minus 0.8.
Yes, you're right.
Thank you.
Spreadsheets.
This is a table.
I know.
Okay. So where we are in terms of this is so at the high school, I just received the numbers for staffing today. For course tallies, Albert and I will start to really go through those and take a look. We've budgeted those sections mostly to be flat. At the middle school, we're actually going to be down about 0.4 in the full program. We'll break that out more granularly once we see how the approach that I'm taking with the administration this year and the principals is to look at the program like English 612 and Math 712. So we look at this not just by how we staff the building, but we look at it by certification area. And so if we need to move people around, that is possible. And that gives us some flexibility, but we may not need. It's really too soon for me to say what we really need at this point because the tallies for the high school just came in.
Isn't the certification K6 and then
Yes, it is.
712?
Yes, it
right?
is.
So it's because in the past we've had people who were laid off that we've moved around that were 6th grade
Yep.
because they're certified K6.
Right, those are actually elementary teachers.
Teachers,
You're
right.
absolutely right. Yes, you're absolutely right. All right, so we will. So I'll keep the board apprised of this as it changes. Are there any questions on staffing?
Nope.
No. Okay, so that essentially concludes the
Most exciting part of our year.
the most exciting part of your year.
Maybe of your year.
So what I think is important for so assume as long as there are no no edits that the board wishes us to move forward with, we'll bring back the budget. Like now, essentially now is the time, right? So if there are cuts or adds or feedback or whatever it is, this is the moment to do that.
Just as a follow-up to last time, the PD?
Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me. I have the answer to that question. So, Rob and I went through all the PD requests, and in almost all instances where a request was made, the reduction didn't necessarily reflect that there would not be PD in that area. So rather than have 6 teachers participate, there might be 4 teachers that participate. So there was nothing. So as we went through all the lines of what was approved and what was not approved, and how many people were having access to what, I felt comfortable with the number, the 250,000 that we had put forward. Obviously, that money can always be put to good use. So, but I would say in this moment, I feel very comfortable with the number that we gave you.
I'm comfortable with your comfort, but I do want to be. But
I'm comforted by that.
But good. But I think it should be. I just want to make spending more would be giving more teachers professional development if we had gone that route. Although, as I say, I am comfortable without it because that's your recommendation.
It is.
But
my
we are
recommendation.
moving in that direction. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Sarah.
Okay, so this is the last chance on the big picture for us to have this conversation. So the big picture for me right now is, with Herman's view about potentially less state aid. Inflation, and I don't think anyone's going to dispute inflation's going up, which means the cost of things is going up. So that's the one side of it. On the other side, I'm going to say aggressive. We know we were aggressive on some lines in the budget, that we cut the professional development, there are cuts to special ed. We discussed various lines, through this long process that we've had, where we've had a lot of very detailed conversations about lines that seem very tight relative to our 5-year actual expenditures. We know we've got this $297,000 gap between this budget and the levy limit, which is whatever you leave, it's permanent and forever, right? So I'm not feeling comfortable with saying, that's, 3 1/3 years to $1 million that you said goodbye to. That you're saying goodbye to now, and of course, we're telling whoever comes in the future they can't have it either. All of this leaves me uncomfortable. We have had situations in past board meetings, not last year, maybe not the year before, where we have decided, you know, even at the last minute, to make a motion not to go all the way, but to put some of it back. So I'm quite conflicted about what I want to do with that regard. Because Peter's spoken very clearly about professional development, and that seems like a place to put it. I don't want to go through the laundry list of things we discussed, but there were places, and some of them were in special ed too. Yeah, but you know.
We're in special ed, because the special ed was built on actual student need.
Yes, well, there was some. There was like the summer psychologist, there was the, you know, but we had the gentleman who at the end was like, you know, when you add up just like the cuts, right, the big lines that are going down, you know, 45% of that's coming from special ed. Special ed is a very unique thing to budget for, right? In a lot of instances, we're dealing with, you know, a specific list of students and a specific list of cost. But we had instances where we were talking about work psychologists would do over the summer. That the conversation we had then was we felt we could tighten it up, you know? I hope that's true. We talked about overtime, we talked about substitutes. And so the other piece of this, and we talked about this before too, so I apologize, is that the tighter the budget, the more the impact on that fund balance line, which we just had the conversation about, and how that, you know, having that fund balance has become part of our revenue side, and is how we deal with the capital reserve.
So, Sarah, can I interject?
I wish you would.
So I agree with you. I'm uncomfortable with leaving all of that on the table, which is what I've been whispering to Peter about as well. I'm uncomfortable with us leaving essentially $300,000 on the table.
Not for no reason, but in this context.
Right,
of
in this
things we've cut.
context, exactly, in this context. So I would suggest that we split the difference with it. And I am concerned about the comment that was made with the special ed reduction. And I guess my question would be in how we budget the budget lines for special education, knowing that at any point someone could move into the district and require a tremendous amount of additional services. And where we put that contingency, is it possible to put some of this up to the allowable limit into that? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
I do.
And you can help me find where that is, because I don't know where that is.
So, I mean, so here are my notes. When I went back and looked at the actuals, special education miscellaneous therapy, you know, looked out of line with the actuals by a lot, you know, $100,000. We talked about it. Peter said like part of that could be covered by behavioralists, but that was a number that seemed very out of line.
I think what we're saying is
special education home teachers much lower than actuals, you know, for the past several years.
So I think what we're saying is
like
we're not saying we want to add a position to the budget, or we're not saying do it just for the sake of doing it, but are we perhaps undercutting ourselves for years to come by allowing that 300,000 to be left, 300,000, excuse me, to be left?
I'm one of the people on the board that is opposed to adding anything to the budget, and I think Peter's done a terrific job in terms of structuring it the way he has. With the Tax Reform Act, we're going to have a lot of people on Long Island paying more, not less in terms of taxes. We have a lot of people stretched. I think this is a very prudent budget, and to increase it just for the sake of increasing it is not something I'm prepared to do.
I would second Herman. And I would say that every year, other than the year that we had to spend money on rectifying the playgrounds, that we've had over approximately $1.8 to $2 million left over right? And $1 million of which we put towards the budget, and the other $1 million that we put into reserve. So I think when the budget is done, it's done with a built-in cushion on it that I'm comfortable with. And I think you've had many people here expressing the difficulty they have with the whole American water situation and the increase in water. And I believe that, as Herman said, that Peter and Olivia have done an excellent job and have done a very careful analysis, and I'm comfortable with adopting what the administration has recommended to us.
Trustees, anyone else? Joanna? Rich?
I mean, I tend to agree with that. I think Peter and Olivia have spent hours and hours of time looking at this carefully, and I think that they're careful in terms of not cutting us short where they actually believe we should be. So I would tend to agree with what Herman said as well.
Joanna? Okay. Dave? Trustee Ledmar.
So I don't disagree that they have presented us with a very thoroughly researched budget.
100%.
We're with you.
And I don't disagree that we have been prudent and careful in putting that together. That said, there are two pieces of evidence that I think we have to look at that are indisputable. And one of those is that we have unknowns going forward, and the other is that we have every year a cyclical process of adjustments in our budget that reveals no matter how carefully we look at these numbers, and no matter how great our administration is, we're just not going to know. So the idea that we couldn't increase the levy by any amount up to that $300,000, I don't feel comfortable with the idea that, well, they've looked at it too carefully for us to wonder if there could be more room in there. And I think the fact that looking long term, as Olivia laid out, all the forces that are lining up against us, it seems that if we're going to err on one side, knowing that one side does give us more flexibility in the future without realistically changing the average taxpayer situation in any tangible way this year, is an argument in favor of some modest increase closer to what that gap could be, to what that limit could be, without approaching it all the way.
May I?
Please.
Okay. So, if the board were wanting to put more money into the budget, right? So what I would say to you is I've given the board a budget that I believe supports what I think I need to run the schools and the program and staff them, and so I don't want this to be about that I don't have what we need, because I believe that we do. That said, if there were places in the budget that you wanted to increase those lines, right, I would just need some direction on where you want them, where the board would want them to be, if at all.
You do understand that we're not saying that we don't agree with your budget.
I
and that
totally,
we
yes,
don't-
and I understand
It's not that we don't support that and feel that you've done a completely thorough job
Totally.
in presenting what is needed to serve the students in our community. We're trying to take the long view picture.
Understood.
Very long, and acknowledge the pressures that may
Right.
have caused us to cut
Sure.
it really close.
To me, an issue that's come up, and in two ways I think this is important, and I'm just within the context of what we're talking about. And I think we said about our level of comfort about where we are right now. But I think the enrollment survey, as I think we all know, has been a major problem for me, and that's not an administration question. That's a
Right.
question of that outside firm and the failings, even 12 months later, of what they predicted and the changes that we've already seen. And directly related to that is that kindergarten class of 321s in Glenwood Landing. So if you're asking, I assume that's about $100,000, and that's a third of the way there at least, and that's a direct
How many
situation.
students do we tip over there? What is it in Glenwood Landing?
What is the point at which we would split a section? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Well, that's
For kindergarten?
For elementary, it's generally, it's 23, 24. And once you hit 24, we look at splitting. And that's generally what we've done. My kids had 24 kids in their class in elementary school.
Just last year.
Just last year.
No, I think we.
Let me just pull it up here, please.
Not kindergarten per se, but elementary I'm talking as a broad rule for elementary. The breaking point is 23, 24, where we look at it.
So when you look at the 18-19 enrollment projections, they are on page 2 in section C of your narrative.
I mean, that 24 may be a threshold, but the largest class we have anywhere is 22, and that's in 5th grade, and that's as a result of those students having smaller classes all the way through, where we feel, you feel as as the educator in charge of this, that what's best for their educational interest at this point. You and I have had this conversation. I'm not that there has to be that. Let me put it this way. And Peter, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that at some point developmentally, it is good to transition from a very small elementary class into a larger environment to foster independence and the skills they're going to need going forward, which doesn't really.
I think 22 I think 22 in grade 5 is a very reasonable.
I don't disagree in any way.
Number for kids.
And it's not in my position to say that that I disagree that 21 is appropriate in kindergarten. My point is more, I disagree that we're going to end up with 321s.
Exactly.
So.
But there's enough money in the budget if we had to add a teacher, and I believe the budget assumes that you have 2 extra elementary teachers in there in case we have to do additional class sizes. So I think the contingency that you're concerned about, Dave, is already covered in the budget. And I would suggest that maybe we have a vote and see if anyone wants to increase the budget at this point, because I think we've discussed a lot of these issues already as we've gone through the budget.
I can make one more point. Oh, sorry.
Just asking a question, whether, going back to the question of splitting the difference, is that feasible to Ariane, Herman? No?
I think it's a mistake. I think we have a prudent budget. I would like to stand by a prudent budget. I almost find this discussion to be surreal. The superintendent has made a recommendation. We have confidence in the superintendent. We're saying to him, more, you should increase it even more. I think that's the wrong message to the community.
I'm just asking the question.
Herman, I don't think we're saying more. We're trying to take the long view and look at how this affects us with the tax levy limit. So I think it's a fair discussion for us to have.
I didn't say it's not fair. I also take the long view. I have the expertise as an economist. Besides, I think it's a prudent budget. I think that's what we should go forward with.
With regard to Marion's point about having contingencies in the budget, that is true for almost any expense. You brought up the example of the mulch, which no one foresaw and cost a huge amount of money that was in the budget. But the point of budgeting isn't to say, well, we could work it out later. It's to look at what you think you need right now. And I understand the administration feels that number is where we will land. But because of my doubts about that number and because of other reasons, I don't think saying, well, we could find the money if it came up. To me, I feel strongly it's going to come up, and that would be an area that would make sense to me.
What I'm saying to you, Dave, is that he's covered that contingency specifically with 2 teachers. So that would be beyond the need of the 21. When we went through the budget, you could have reduced the elementary staffing more, right? But you left yourself a cushion of 2 teachers, correct? To cover that contingency. So that concern has been specifically addressed in this budget.
So are you asking if I could have reduced the sections further, or I could have reduced the
staffing?
The staffing. Okay. So the staffing, what I've done is I've gone through every single cohort of kids in the program, And I have actually done the exercise of taking whatever number is in the cohort and dividing it by one fewer section. The only place that that really works is in the Seacliff Rising Grade 5, right? Because that is 44 children in 3 sections right now. So if I take that and I divide that by 2, I end up at 22, which is a number that I consider to be reasonable. And remember, the second half of one of those sections will be co-taught, so it's supported by kids. So there isn't anywhere else in here that I would feel really comfortable. You certainly you could if you wanted to, but that wouldn't be my recommendation. And I think that to Dave, Dave, your point, right? Keeping those primary classes on the lower side, those that yields you greater rewards in the long term.
Then on the later side.
Absolutely.
That was a very interesting conversation. I hadn't thought about those points, but larger classes later actually has that benefit. That was really interesting.
Right.
Okay, so we need to move on because it's late. Yep.
Thank you, I appreciate it. The budget recommendation is prudent, but it has context and it reflects a lot of pressures. I still feel pretty haunted by Dave's point last time about the ratio of the money we spend on professional development towards the cost of the whole staff, that's not really, it's a bad analogy, but how a business would operate if you're investing, $70, $80 million in your people every year, you wouldn't invest $200,000 in their development. But that may not be the place to put money, I don't know. We, cut aids, we've done many things. But in the same sense that I believe we could live with this budget and, we'll survive, it'll be prudent, we'll see where we end up at the end of the year. But I do believe it is much tighter than the budgets that produce the fund balances of the past, and we've articulated that. I think that if we were to say, we think we can spend another $100,000, I 100% believe that they would find prudent places to do so. That, we're not talking about nothing, like they will make the best choice about what they do. And of course, in the context of the budget, it's not that much money.
And speaking
It's a tenth of 1%.
on the larger philosophical question of what's prudent, I think piercing the cap would be something that would be imprudent. We're not talking about a revolution in this budget. That's my point.
We're not talking about going to the cap.
We're talking about student-based expenditures, direct student-based expenditures.
I don't think we have the support for it, Sarah. I agree with you.
We may not. I'm letting Peter mull it over in case suddenly he's like, oh my God.
We either vote or...
Trustees, where are we? Are you is everyone staying where they are?
But both, we
Okay.
can find out. I feel like we should
I
make
think
it formal, even if I'm gonna lose.
But we're not voting on the vote. We're not voting on the
Well, I
budget.
can make a motion, so that we have something, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so then we
Absolutely.
have the vote and,
Absolutely.
we
But that's not right now. That's not on here now, is it? No.
No, I would have to move. I would say, like,
Right.
I'd like to move
Okay.
that we ask the superintendent to bring us a budget with an additional $100,000 in spending, assuming he can find prudent, he can find an impactful place to put it.
Okay. And a second?
You made that motion?
That's my motion,
Okay.
unless someone sees something to fall.
Call the question.
Is there any
Is there any, are there any questions or concerns? All in favor of supporting Sarah's motion to move to increase the budget by $100,000 at the discretion of the superintendent in the areas which he feels prudent?
Impactful.
Impactful? Not prudent, impactful. All in favor? All right.
We lose, fair enough.
All right. Let's move on. Okay. Let's do personnel. No, we did that already. We'll do that after.
Neil Concha, Republican, I think Tim has a comment.
Oh. Tim, go for it.
I hate to say this. We made a motion to move that
I know, we did.
So we have another comment.
We do. Can we, let's just get through. We moved it.
But it's at the end. Sorry.
Okay. Action item B, personnel. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And I have a second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Action item C, approval of resolution to appoint general and labor counsel. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second? All in favor? Action item D, approval of budget transfer. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Any comments?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have anything on the walkie-talkies?
Yes, I do. I brought it with me. I'm sorry. I meant to copy it for the board, but I... You're welcome.
Is it hard to look at?
Is it hard to look at? No, not necessarily. So do you have a specific question that I can answer, and then I'm happy to have, pass along what's here.
It's a lot of money. We don't
It
have
is.
anything. RP bids, what do we get for it? I'll tell you.
Okay,
anything.
so I will tell you. So the way the money is constructed in the following ways. There is a repeater that has to be set up. What a repeater does is it allows us to communicate from one point in town to another point in town in a secure way. So there is a repeater at the high school that needs to be installed. That's $13,567. There's a repeater at the Seacliff School that will need to be installed for $15,907, and then a repeater at Glenwood Landing for $12,367. So this allows that communication to go from one place to another. There are 154 devices that have been assigned across the district. Principals, monitors, playground, 154. So I'll tell you how they're allocated in a minute. The devices are $619 per device, and that's it's $95,441. So that's most of the cost of the expenditure here. And then we have 12 multi-unit chargers. So those are they will sit in the main office and charge the units when they are not in use. How they are being distributed across the district. And then so within each building there are all the equipment, batteries, cables, connectors, a shelf for a duplexer, a UHF antenna. These things have to be registered with the FCC, and there are licensing costs associated with that.
Peter, what happens if there's a power outage? Do we have any backup for the system? Does it have any kind of redundancy so that we are truly protected in a difficult situation?
They're charged, and then so they charge overnight, and then and the battery actually, I haven't used them before. The battery actually lasts a very long time, but we have generator power. If we were to lose power, we could always charge them in that way. Okay. But there are 20, so just to give you a sense of how we're coming to 154, 26 units are at Glen Head. So that's the principal, the secretaries, the custodians, the security staff, the nurses, the lunch monitors, the phys ed teachers, because they're out on the playgrounds with kids, so we want them to be able to be in communication. The staff who does bus duty will have the technology, and we have a spare. So the social worker has one, the psychologist has one. So 26 at Glen Head.
So there'll be one on every floor, hopefully, the intention?
There'll be, I don't think we've thought about it in that way, because we'll have the PA system in the floor, but if you're out with children in the playground, then we would want somebody to have a walkie with them. There are 26 units for Glenwood Landing, 20 units for Seacliff, 23 for the middle school, 37 at the high school.
And this unit, will it be covered by our insurance?
The unit itself?
Well, all the walkie-talkies, and if people are going to lose them, break them, smash them.
I hope not.
There's no question. It's an ongoing budget item.
Yeah?
They will disappear.
They will. I'm just wondering if our insurance would cover it, and
No.
if we have to add a rider.
I don't think so.
It wasn't our insurance company.
Yeah, I would
Where
think
in the
we'd need
budget
a
is that?
rider.
Peter, should we add
Do you
one
need
for the
some
board
money?
president? I'm serious, so that that person can be in communication with key officials at the schools.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your
Add one
question.
for the board president.
As long as she's in town, then that works. Otherwise, when she,
Proven out of town, that wouldn't be a good thing.
Might be. No, but I wouldn't work, it wouldn't work out of,
An
just out of.
emergency situation where we had to have a lockdown and she was at work or he was at work, not locally.
Well, but, right, she could be away, but she could be here too. So it's not, I mean, it's a very marginal,
so we've also included units for, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
no, it's fine.
We also included units for the transportation facility for the central office, so I will have one.
Right.
Betty will have one on her desk. The assistant superintendents will have them. Their support staff will have them. The funding from it is coming from budget transfer in this year, so I don't need to fund that in 1819. I'm sorry.
And I was serious in terms
Yeah.
of saying that the board president should be issued one to be able to stay in touch in case the person is in the area. I think that's still a pivotal person in terms of what goes on in the district.
We can talk. We
Okay.
can talk about
We can
that.
talk about
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
But I,
Few questions.
all right,
Sure.
The numbers, the dollars you just gave us, where are those from?
They're from the vendor.
Vendor?
The vendor is, Olivia, remind me who this is again?
All right, so there's, it doesn't matter. It's a vendor.
It's on the state bid.
It's on the state contract.
Okay, so there's a vendor who does this that's on the state contract,
Yes.
which is why you believe this is a good price for
Absolutely.
what it is. Okay, this is helpful. I asked you, I think, at some point, but I don't think we did it publicly, in which I wanted to talk, and I think Herman will enjoy this, about the extent to which these are digitally secure channels, because if you are actually in a crisis and someone can hear your communications or interfere with or interject into them, you are in a worse situation.
So that's why they get registered with the FCC. They are digitally secure. So it functions in the same way that the police radio. So when the Nassau County Police is on their radios, you can't. You're not on their radios.
People
It's
use
secure.
scanners and listen to them all the time and paste it on Facebook. I'm not kidding. People they
Okay.
listen to scanners all
They-
the time. That's not secure.
I will get the rationale for these are secure.
Do the repeaters have battery backups?
Sarah, I don't know.
Okay. So I think the question is, we're going to approve the budget transfer. It's hard to know exactly what we're approving. We can approve the budget transfer, but then is there a subsequent opportunity to approve the actual contract?
There isn't a contract because it's through the state contract.
Yes, it's a state contract.
Is there an additional opportunity to approve anything on paper with details about what we're getting with all this money?
Why don't I do this? Why don't I take this? Because I really did mean to get this to. I apologize.
You've been busy. I'm not-
I will get this, the recommendation with all the backup to the board first thing tomorrow morning. I would, if there are suggestions or comments that need to be made, then I would like them fairly quickly. I will tell you, this is a major hole in our ability to function in a safe and secure way. So it is really a very strong recommendation that we do it. And I don't want to wait a lot of time to move it into action, but I understand that
I don't
wanna see
disagree
this.
with you at
Yep.
all. Right. It's a
Could we
difficult.
pass it tonight on condition that once you have that additional
the lead
information,
time.
you get the concurrence of the president and vice president before moving forward?
that's fine with me.
If y'all are fine with
Yeah.
that, that's
I'm really fine with it. I'm more concerned about not having something in an emergency. And I don't really think, unless you did a formal RFP where we were reviewing the RFP, that we're going to get any more insight than what's already been
the state
done.
contract is
Okay.
good news.
All right.
I am too concerned about,
I don't
do think there's an ongoing expense.
I don't disagree with anything you said. I think one of the concerns is that when you have a crisis and you have a situation and you have fear in the community, that there's a feeling that maybe throwing money at a situation makes us all feel better. That said, Peter, you said you give this a strong recommendation. I'm very comfortable voting for it today. Tony and Sarah want to look at it in more detail. I'm happy with that as well.
All right, all in favor? Thank you. Action item E, acceptance of donation from the North Shore.
Second.
Okay, from 2017, all in favor? Thank you to 2017. Acceptance of donation from David Roth to the wood shop.
Second.
Motion, any comments? All in favor? Thank you to Mr. Roth. Approval of resolution regarding New York State and local retirement system section 41J. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
And I have a second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Action item H, approval of health services contracts. May I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Any comments or questions? All in favor? Action item I, approval of agreement with Janet S. Wong. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And I have a second. Comments, questions? All in favor? Action item J, approval of special education services, the IEP. I have a motion.
Second.
Questions? All in favor? Action item K, approval of resolution, date of the annual school district budget vote and election, which is May 15. I have a motion and a second. Comments or questions? All in favor? Action item done. Comments from the public, please.
Tim Madden, Seacliff. Just a question on action item C on the Labor Council. Was that formerly Ingerman and Smith?
Yes.
And I'm just curious when that decision was made. Did they have something that expired? Was it before their term was up? I mean, was there a contract with them to be council for a number of years? So their term expired, and then...
It expires at the end of the year.
And then, okay, and did you interview other firms?
We did an RFP, and we had a whole RFP process. We reviewed, we decided who we were going to for initial interview. There was a subcommittee. Those of us on the subcommittee did the initial screening, and then we made a recommendation to the board as to who to bring back. Then the entire board met with the final candidates, and then there was a discussion amongst the board, and now it's, being formalized.
Okay.
And it will be effective July 1.
Okay.
It was thorough.
I just want to comment on the discussion regarding the tax levy and coming in $300,000 below it. I'm not sure why part of the discussion was not looking at reserves. You're taking out $650,000 more out of reserves for next year than you're taking out of reserves for this year's budget. And I mean, to me, that seems where your answer is. I agree with Sarah, David, and Tony that it is prudent to look at future budgets and see, you don't want to tie the hands of future boards, and you're blowing a $300,000 hole, compounding at about 2% annually forever, not just for this year. You're talking 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You're affecting people who aren't even born yet when you make that decision. And I understand the tax cap law is a stupid law. The tax cap should be based on the previous year's cap, not on the previous year's levy. And that would solve the problem very quickly so that you could do this. And so I don't know at what point you could have a discussion, but perhaps you can take less than $650,000 more than you took last year out of reserves. I think you can easily cut that and bring up the levy, and you're keeping more money in reserves, and you're ensuring that you have the $300,000 for future students. That's my comment there. And then I haven't stayed for a lot of the old business discussions, and maybe this has come up in old business, but I haven't heard much talk about the bond that was discussed last year. I guess around this time last year, last spring. Is there anything happening with the? It seemed like it needed to be blended in with current debt service at a certain point, and timing was pretty critical for that. And I haven't heard any discussions on that.
Okay, I can answer that for you, Tim. So the board has put out RFPs for construction management for pre-construction services and for architectural firms. We have received those RFPs. We're actually just sorting through all of them and getting them to a place where the board can evaluate them. It will follow the same process that we followed for the legal RFPs. So we'll have a subcommittee of 3 board members that will work with Olivia, John Hall, myself. We will evaluate who meets the criterion of the RFP, invite them in for an initial interview with the subcommittee, and then depending on how that goes, so with the law firms, we had 3 finalists go and meet with the full board. We'll make a determination of who the best candidates are for the board to see for pre-construction and for architectural services. So the idea would be to get that moving within the next couple of months. To the extent that the board wishes to appoint somebody to do that work, then we will then get that planning and study done for the fall. But we have all of next, so the debt service falling off piece, that happens at the end of next year. So for the 1920 budget.
So have the projects have been decided on?
The projects have not been decided. The projects will be largely generated out of the pre-bond work that we are embarking on doing now through the architects and the construction management.
Just want to make a point. There are many factors that go into what would or may or may not be included in that bond. So this is not a complete answer, but one of the factors is that, as Peter alluded to earlier, we just completed a pretty comprehensive strategic planning review for the district that helped kind of, with Peter at the helm, kind of readdress what our top priorities were over the next 3 to 5 years, and that's something that was just completed this week, or really close to completed, and that will certainly inform the process as well. I think that was, for Peter, I don't want to speak for him, but an important part of the process to see
To move forward with the budget.
prioritization.
With the bond, right.
So from what I remember last summer, though, I mean, there was discussion of bringing the community into the process. At what point does that take place?
It will.
Mayor?
Yeah.
Yes. So the way that this would unfurl is the board would first determine who they want to contract with to do their pre-bond work. So who will be their construction manager, who will be their architect, and then from there, then we'll engage with the architect and the construction management and our facility staff and me and the board on opening up a wide net to get input on where the priorities are. Okay. So that's all very much in the queue.
Okay. All right. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it worked very well.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
We'll do the same.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Okay. We have old business. We're going to skip one of the old business things, and we're going to do just because it has to be in the budget. I mean, it has to be in the notice, right?
Correct.
The discussion of the transportation limits and the capital reserve projects. We're just going to do this briefly because it has to be in, unless the board feels they need to have a fuller discussion about the transportation limits.
Just cost involved, right?
What?
You're saying we're going to discuss transportation under old business if we think it can be.
Well, just because, right,
Okay.
because the we were faced with the.
Because of the election deadline.
Right, because of the election
Absolutely.
deadline, we need to have a decision, and unless, we can't decide upon it, then we'll have to push it to the next meeting, but I think it's pretty clear which path we would go.
Right, the backup on that was terrific and very clear.
The one that,
On the
for
transportation.
ridership for transportation, that moves us from, give me the numbers, like.
A mile and a half to a mile,
Right,
right?
a mile and a half to a mile for the high
limit in
school.
line with the middle school
right.
limit.
And the elementary school. So the whole district would have the same limit as opposed to what we had before, which were
And it
3
doesn't
different
cost us
limits.
Anything,
Elementary's
Oh, it's
3/4,
just a
isn't
12
it?
or what? Okay.
Right, elementary's 3/4.
High school and middle
so
school will
High
be-
school and middle school will be 1 mile. Okay.
and cost
It's,
nothing?
does anyone else have a disagree with that? Does everybody agree with that?
I move we go forward.
Well, all right, let's.
I would go for, the only thing I would say is that we also did some analysis on the early and late bus, and the numbers were, much, much less than we were given when we looked at this 5 years ago. So I would like to keep that as, not for this year, but going forward, I would like to keep an eye on those numbers and see if that's not a feasible option down the road. Because if you look at it, it's about $300,000 as opposed to the number we were given 5 years ago, which was millions of dollars. So it's a significantly different number.
It's just 3 times more for the private school buses than ours.
What do we have to decide for capital
So
reserve projects?
So as far as can I just wrap up the
Sure.
transportation thing for one quick second here?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Vote, right? There was a motion, but we got a second vote.
I don't think we have to vote on that, do we?
Yes, we do.
We
Oh,
do?
sure,
Okay.
yeah.
You do.
Absolutely. I'll second it after Peter's done.
Discussion? Go ahead, Peter.
Go ahead.
So we'll pick up another 300 kids in the queue here. So what will be happening here is a few moving parts. You'll have the Proposition 1, which would be the budget, the regular budget. Proposition 2 would be this reducing the mileage in the same way that you did last year at no cost to the taxpayer.
Right.
Right. So that's really clear here. So we can accomplish this with no cost. The third, what I'm proposing is that we take on a third proposition this year, and the third proposition relates to the capital reserve that the board established on May 17, 2016 through voter approval. Okay, the capital reserve all the reserves are highly regulated on how you can take money, how you can put money in, how you can take money out. In order to take money out of the capital reserve and use it for the projects for which you established it for, it requires voter approval. Okay? So you establish the capital reserve with 8.5 million. You've established a very comprehensive set of projects that you did a lot of publicity on, that accounts to that money. What I'm recommending that we do now is phase 1 of those capital projects, and that includes air conditioning the library spaces at Glen Head, air conditioning the cafeteria space at Glen Head, air conditioning air conditioning the auditorium at Glenwood Landing and the library space at Glenwood Landing. Adding the second air-conditioned large group space at Seacliff. So it gets hot. Air conditioning the middle school cafeterium, the air conditioning the high school gymnasium, replacing the cafeteria ceiling and new LED lights at the high school. And then to the extent that bids come in lower, because sometimes they do, sometimes projects underrun, we have 2 contingencies, and those involve windows in the second floor hall at Seacliff and installing an exhaust fan in the hallways and stairwells at Seacliff as well. So all that comes together to $200,000.
You will be very happy to have air conditioning in the gymnasium if you have to have graduation in there. Trust me.
Or take a Regents exam.
Right. So a question about the transportation. I was looking at those late buses and early buses. The routes are going to be obviously this is not happening, but 2 hours long. Adding these additional distances to these regular buses is going to change the length of those bus routes. How for these kids who are riding the bus right now?
What did Michelle say on that, Olivia? The length of the routes.
By adding the kids to the bus routes.
We were going to use the same stops, so it's not going to.
So if you live a half mile longer, you get a ride
Like
to the
North
stop?
Shore Acres.
I would be that, I'm one of those, because of where I live, I'm just beyond, my kids can't get buses for middle school and high school, so they would walk to the same bus stop.
So it's the student responsibility to get to the stop.
Yeah.
Great.
If they move in Witchawetta, they'll go to the stop.
But it's like North Shore Acres too. There are a couple of people that are just off, and that's a real issue with those sidewalks.
Yes, it is.
So this really is a big deal for people.
I agree.
We got to.
What?
Listen, every time I ask about busing, I get more.
So wait, everybody stay together, we're almost done. Peter, how will this look on the ballot?
There'll be 3 propositions. One will authorize the district to levy the tax.
Yeah.
One will be to reduce the transportation limits for students in grades 9 through 12 at no cost to the taxpayer. And the third would be to authorize the board to, I'm going to not get the exact right legal terms out, but allow the board to access $3.4 million from the capital reserve for the purpose of these items.
Okay.
Which have already been approved by the voters.
Exactly.
Right, so, all in favor of doing,
I
need a
think you need
motion.
2 motions, don't you?
I would.
Why can't we do them together?
I don't think you can.
2.
2 motions.
Can I have
already had a motion and a
Can I have a
second
motion
on
to do the
transportation.
transportation change? I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Okay, now, to do the capital reserve project change. Can I have a motion?
I'd like to make a
I have a motion.
No, I was going to say it longer, but that's fine. I'll second.
All right, second.
All in favor?
Okay, all in favor? Thank you. So
Keep it
moved.
moving.
All right.
Okay, so one last point on this, right?
yes.
So since the board approved the legal notice for the budget tonight, we will need to develop a legal notice for each of these propositions. We will
Okay.
do that right away. And we will try, if to the extent that the board is available, we can get at least a quorum of you to approve those legal notices.
Approve the actual notice of the word.
Exactly.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Thank you very much.
Fair enough. Motion to adjourn?
We got one.
What?
No.
What?
I'm just going to throw, I'm not going to have the whole discussion.
So I just, well, we didn't do any, so anyhow, Peter, you're having this forum for the community. I just wanted to lend a voice on the board, letting you know there is a lot of misinformation out there. There was a lot of fear. I think it's very important that you have this forum, that you publicize the forum. I'm extremely glad to know that you're doing it. I just want to let you know that I very strongly support this. It's important to have people having real information about what's going on with every aspect and give, I mean, I know it's late and everyone's complaining, but that night hopefully will be late too, and everyone will be complaining because we sat there and took all the questions and were able to get people what they needed. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sarah?
We received budget transfer reports. Thank you very much for the first and the second quarter, for the ones that were under the board approval level. So I made a request before, maybe we can discuss it more next time. I wanted to see some context for that. It was 36,000 transferred in the first quarter and 75,000 transferred in the second quarter. But because we have not previously gotten these, I don't have any context to put that in. I'd like that. I would like it if we could review for the entire board the law that governs which codes can be transferred to which codes that we all heard about in our board training whenever you first started on the board. But also if we could go over what it is that our board policy specifies. I find our board policy on budget transfers awkward at best. So I think I'd like us all to be clear about what can and cannot happen without explicit board approval. And mainly, thank you. So
Okay.
can we do those things?
Yeah.
I emailed it previously, so
You can.
you can get it.
That was
And
the other
Peter
thing I
has one
forgot to
more
photocopy for you. I have it.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We should get somebody to.
Thank you.